Well, this is Vanessa Hudson's first day. She's been the CFO. She's been at Qantas for decades upon decades. Is she really the right person to lead this company out of the hole it's in?
Well, it's certainly terrific to see a female CEO step up to the plate, particularly one that's come from the position of CFO, so she understands the numbers behind Qantas and what makes the airline tick. We would hope to see that this is a fresh start from Qantas's perspective and a new attitude towards the flying public that rely so heavily on what we keep referring to as the national carrier ensues after the ascension of the new CEO. And I think that that's exactly the message that she's trying to send too.
But to come out and say we promise to put customers first, that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it, about what's wrong at Qantas in recent months, the fact that that wasn't so obvious to them in the first place.
Look, obviously Qantas have an objective, which is to be a profitable airline. We understand that. That's why Alan Joyce made the decisions that he has made. However, I think that the backlash from the flying public, and indeed from the regulators and now from government as well, suggests that they perhaps had a tin ear on the issues that were affecting all of us. The good news is, I think that we can draw a line in the sand and move on, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the government is doing its part in unwinding what does seem to be a very cosy relationship between the current government and Qantas, because that decision to deny Qatar Airways,
governments. Well, I mean, what was different when the coalition was in power for a decade?
Well, that decision to deny Qatar Airways at the expense of the flying public, at a cost to ordinary Australians, I think is a significant one that does need to be unpacked. At the last time that similar decisions that were made, that the government is now pointing to, Minister McCormack made in the previous government, that was at a time when airfares were at record lows, not record highs. Why was this decision made during a cost of living crisis? And that's really the questions that we want to have answered by them.
Are you in danger of over-egging your support perhaps for Qatar here, given there has been no apologies for that horrific incident that happened on their aircraft regarding women?
The event that occurred to those women was just extraordinary. It was appalling. And my understanding is that at the time we worked quite closely with the Qatari government to ensure that there was indeed an apology issued. However, there's probably still some questions to answer there, and certainly there is an ongoing legal case, which I'm not going to comment on because it is still within the courts. That said, this is a very separate decision, and the separate decision is one about the cost of airfares and whether this government has made decisions to limit competition in a market where it knows prices are now artificially inflated. The government had an opportunity to lower airfares for Australians and it chose not to. Why was that? It hasn't been able to explain so. Now, if Catherine King says that the national interest, whatever the national interest is, that was what we want to have explained to us because, quite frankly, if it's security issues, why hasn't she consulted with those, members of her cabinet that are involved in security portfolios? They've already said that they haven't been consulted.
You're right. It would have been taken to the National Committee of Cabinet to discuss that issue. But one last question this. When we talk about that horrific incident that happened on Qatar Airways, would you blame the government if they might not be able to say publicly, but if that weighed on their thinking in this decision?
It does sound inconsistent, though, doesn't it? Because Qatar Airways already has
if you were in
roots
Catherine
to Australia.
King's position, would you be taking into account that incident?
Well, if she is taking that incident into account, should she not be more explicit about that? And if she has taken that into account, that's, let's face it, is a human rights issue. Why has she not discussed this with Penny Wong, who would be the relevant minister? Penny Wong has already said that she wasn't consulted on the decision around Qatar. So there's too many inconsistencies here. That's what this Senate inquiry will hopefully uncover.
Okay, Jane Hume, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
You too.